Good afternoon, and welcome to the Lethbridge City Council meeting for Tuesday, May the 4th, 2021. We apologize for the delay. We were in a previous meeting. So for those who are waiting, please accept our apologies. We'll start with the Acknowledgement Statement. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we're gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people, past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. We'll now move on to bouquets. Councillor Morrow?
Nothing, thank you.
Councillor Crowson?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. A week or so ago, the volunteer awards were given out, so just a congratulations to everyone who received an award and to everyone in our community who volunteers, even if you don't receive an award, because we would not be the community we are without all the volunteers. And thank you, as we all do, recognize everyone who follows the health protocols and who are helping to keep everyone in our community safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hagan?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Parker?
Nothing, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Miyashiro?
Nothing today, thank you.
Councillor Campbell?
Nothing today, thank you.
Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Just thanks to everyone on council and administration that came out to Tourism Lethbridge's AGM last week. We had a full slate of directors elected to the board. So just an update to council. I am now off the board, so that will give some of you some relief and comfort. But I'd like to welcome and congratulate all the incoming directors and the continuing directors for Tourism Lethbridge as they move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman?
Thank you, Mr. Spearman. Just want to recognize that the first week of May annually is Municipal Clerks Week. And everything that we do here comes through the clerk's office, the meetings that are organized and arranged, the support, all of the materials, the information that we require to keep our governance aspect or our governance role going in the organization is done because of the clerk's office. And so I want to thank Ms. Hilford and her staff for the work that they've done. Well, we can operate from our homes or from our offices. If you look at the screen, you see at least 2 members of the clerk's office sitting in the council chambers right now. So they're still required to be on site, especially during council meetings and SPCs. So thank you very much to the clerk and to her staff for the work that you do. It is greatly appreciated, and most of it goes unrecognized, but thank you for it.
I will echo that on behalf of all of Lethbridge City Council. Certainly thank you for making our meetings run smoothly and coordinating all these complicated agendas. Very good. Today, of course, the community hears it's in the regular media. We lost a city employee this week due to COVID. I certainly want to extend my condolences on behalf of Lethbridge City Council to the family. And we know that there are others who are employed by the city and others in our community who've been afflicted by COVID. It is very real. And I just ask everyone to do everything they can to respect the health orders, to keep each other safe. The only way we're going to get through this as a community, and I think the threats, we see the numbers rising right across the province. It's so important to continue to keep each other safe. So the sooner we can get through this all together, the sooner our businesses will be back and vibrant, and we'll be back to our normal lives. But let's make sure that we have as few tragedies as possible. That we're doing, each one of us is doing everything they can to keep others in the community safe. And I certainly want to make sure that our employees and those who are on the front lines, those who are in our hospitals trying to save lives, let's keep everybody safe and keep them in our thoughts and in our minds. Thank you. Councillor Higgin?
Yes, sir, Mayor Spearman. I did want to add one thing in here. I was had the opportunity to attend a virtual town hall fiber optic connectivity in our community, and I wanted to make sure that I gave a shout out to a staff member, Stu Perkins. Stu Perkins has done numerous different engagement sessions with our community regarding broadband, and I remember going back. Councilor Mayor Sherrill will remember here 7 years ago when we first got involved in figuring out how to bring broadband to those that require it, especially those in the industrial park that don't have the ability to get on broadband without some extremely high costs. And so he has worked through him and his team with Doug Hawkins and economic development. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give a huge shout out to Stu Perkins, because he did an amazing job and people are extremely happy with what he's done. So thank you to Stu and his team.
Okay, thank you. I believe he did those engagements in collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce, which is great. Thank you. Okay. We'll move on with the consent agenda. I have a resolution from Deputy Mayor Campbell. Be it resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of City Council held on Tuesday, April 20th, 2021 be approved, and that the Mayor and the City Clerk be authorized to sign the same. And further be it resolved that the minutes of the public hearings held on Tuesday, April the 20th, 2021 be approved, and the Mayor and the City Clerk be authorized to sign the same. And further be it resolved that City Council receive for information the following reports: the status of directed resolutions for May the 4th, 2021, and the procurement summary report for March 2021. And further be it resolved that City Council adopt the recommendations contained in the following Standing Policy Committee reports: the Operational Review Implementation Plan Update, City Council Work Plan Monthly Update for April 2021, cancellation of September 23rd, 2021 meeting of Governance Standing Policy Committee, Nikayuko Japanese Garden New Community Center Update, Community Event Support Grant for 2019 and 2020 report, Lethbridge and Regional Community Housing Corporation LRCH Municipal Block Funding, and Galt Museum and Archives Annual Report. And further be it resolved that City Council give first reading to the following bylaw: Bylaw 6287, Land Use Amendment Re 1025 30th Street West and 1 Abitibi Road West, Gary Station. And further be it resolved that City Council schedule a public hearing for Tuesday, June the 1st, 2021 at 4 p.m. for Bylaw 6287. Deputy Mayor Campbell.
I will open it up for questions from my colleagues if there are any.
Councillor Carlson.
Thanks, Mayor Spearman. I think it's item 2.7. It refers to a cancellation. You're scrolling too fast for me. It's actually not a cancellation. I just want to be clear on that. It's a rescheduling to a week earlier. It reads cancellation. It should be rescheduling.
Mayor Spearman, we'll make that clerical error. Thank you, Councillor Carlson.
That will be corrected. Thank you. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Councillor Carlson caught the first part. The second one on the community event support grant. I'm not certain if it's going to be presented to the next council during operating budget as a budget cycle carry forward, unexpended, just given COVID and the sharp decrease in event spending. Or I don't know if it was one of the things that I sort of started thinking about as I was reviewing that report, and I just wasn't sure if that is the intent or if that will be a conversation in 2 years.
Mr. Dalton or designate, who would like to comment?
I'd ask Ms. Pinkson, please, if she could respond.
Mayor Spearman, through to Councillor Kaufman, I'm not totally up to speed on this So I'm just making the assumption that there's some leftover surplus, which would carry into 2021 and potentially 2022. And that then a decision at the end for 2022 would decide if that would carry over or flow to the MRSR.
Okay, thank you. I just wasn't certain if a recommendation was going to come forward that, and normally we don't. Normally when council has the operating budget consideration, everything resets. But I think just was wondering, just under the context of COVID and the sharp decrease, if we would be carrying over to establish a more robust grant in the next cycle. I don't know if Ms. Harassim had something that she wanted to comment on that.
I would suggest that if council wants to carry that over and not roll into the MRSR reserve, that a resolution be brought forward. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Back to the mover.
We have made the amendments, I see. So if there are no other questions, I'll call for the vote.
Question's been called. All in favor? Are any opposed? Thank you. Now I have a motion from Acting Mayor Crowson, adoption of the agenda. Motion is that the agenda of the regular meeting of City Council on May 4th, 2021 be adopted as presented, including all communications as submitted by the City Clerk. City Clerk, are there any amendments?
Yes, Mayor Spearman, there's one addition to the agenda. It's urgent business in camera. It's a verbal item, and it's entitled Capital Improvement Plan Process. It will be item number 10.5. Thank you.
Thank you. So the resolution will now say that the regular meeting, the agenda for the regular meeting of City Council on May 4th be adopted as amended, including all communications as submitted by the City Clerk. Councillor Crowson.
With that amendment, I'll call the question.
Okay, question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Thank you.
Chairman, we neglected to do a roll call. Would you like me to do that now?
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll now do a roll call before we proceed with the rest of the business of the meeting.
Councillor Kaufman.
Present.
Councillor Higgin.
Present.
Councillor Morrow.
Yep.
Councillor Miyashiro.
Here.
Councillor Parker.
Here.
Acting Mayor Crowson.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Campbell.
I'm here.
Mayor Spearman.
Present.
And Councillor Carlson.
Present.
All accounted for. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to 4.1, which is a presentation from our City Treasurer, operating budget resource requirements.
Mayor Spearman, I just saw Mr. Dalton jump on there. Wasn't sure if he wanted to have some opening remarks or if he was.
Nope, just nope.
Apparently not.
Clear.
Okay.
Okay, Mayor Spearman, members of City Council, here today to, in response to March 23rd resolution that was to identify and propose additional staff resources to implement option 3 as presented on March 10th with the resolution following up on the 23rd of March. And I'm here a bit early. Originally we requested we wouldn't be back to give some information until June, but it quickly became evident that this could potentially have an impact on the CIP deliberations, which is next week, and just wanted to kind of present this information ahead of time so that we can ensure that the information we provide for next week is based on council's desire. So if you jump to the next slide, please, just as a reminder in terms of what the 3 options were that were presented on March 10th. related to the different options, and then the resolution that ultimately was brought forward on the 23rd was to take option 3 and slightly tweak it to show operating budget every 2 years and a CIP every 4 years. Included on slide 4 is the current process that exists today that was presented on March 10th, and just included as a refresher in terms of what that looks like, in terms of the operating budget and capital budget being staggered so that the operating impact of any CIP projects can flow into the operating budget, and also as a way to manage resource capacity in terms of doing them in different years. I just wanted to include on slide 5, the next slide, the proposed process per the resolution, and there, as you can see, there's some question marks on there in terms of this is where the direction from council for next week's budget or CIP deliberations, in terms of what we would do to get the CIP and operating budgets on the same schedule should council approve this proposed process going forward. The challenge is that currently, if we proceed as status quo for next week, the CIP would be based on the 4-year window of 2022 to 2025, and at some point we would require an opportunity to approve 2026 to ensure that the operating budget and the capital budget would be aligned. In this instance, they're proposed that they would be done at the same time in the first full year of an election of a council term, and that then an operating budget would be done 2 years later, in terms of how the slide is laid out here. So the challenge for next week, and some input and decisions from council, would be about should council consider a 5-year CIP approval in order to kind of align those up if this is the direction that council wishes to proceed. The next slide just talks about some of those considerations, what to do about 2026 in terms of CIP timing. Would that require, what that would look like in terms of a CIP done immediately starting in 2022, to kind of potentially for 1 year, or potentially for looking at what council's approved in terms of a 5-year, depending on the decision that is made. Also then just kind of bringing awareness to the capital and operating budget occurring in the same year, and just kind of the capacity and financial issues that presented with that option. And then also just the timing of the strategic plan, and when the newly elected council comes together for that process. And again, just the awareness of decisions that are made and executed in the same council term. That was one of the concerns that was brought forward by council when we were looking at different options. Slide 7 just includes the MGA requirements in terms of ensuring that we have a 3-year financial forecast and a 5-year financial forecast for capital. And just wanted to highlight that. So we would need to ensure that we continue to do a forecast out. I would recommend that we continue to look at 4 years, even if council decides to only approve a 2-year window, just to ensure that we're in compliance with those requirements. And then the next slide just talks about kind of the resource requirement and ongoing impact of this resolution and the proposed kind of solution in terms of rolling that forward. And that leads me to questions and discussion.
Questions from council? So one of the options that isn't presented to us is the status quo, but it's de facto an option, correct? If we choose to do nothing at this late stage? Okay, thank you. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you very much, Mayor Spearman. Thank you, Ms. Pinkson. When I opened my agenda, I sat and stared at this for a minute because it's not June, although it could very well be. So excellent. Thank you for delivering this much faster. And yes, I immediately understood that there would be a CIP implication based on what's being presented here. So that's not a problem at all. Just for clarification, so the resourcing ongoing annual impact, this would be slide, what's the tiny number there? Is that an 8 on page 4 of the agenda?
Slide 8, yes, that's correct.
Yeah, thank you. So the $652,500, that's on top of what we currently spend to do the budget. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, how much do we spend right now then to do a budget?
So this assumes we would do more engagement in terms of online and community input. This would assume that we would do more business planning in terms of aligning with the 2-year operating budget, and then this would require 5 additional staff. So this is the proposed kind of requirements needed to implement what was being proposed in the resolution. What we spend today would be broken up between the resources that exist today in terms of how they allocate their time. I know we've looked in the past at how much it costs to do an operating budget, and it was about 25,000 hours, and it equated to, at the time, I think it was roughly $1.3 million or something. So within the existing staff complement and budget, this is absorbed into that operating cost.
Okay, so just for clarification, this is based on the current process, the current operating process that we use for doing budget. There's no revamping technology, looking at things differently. It's just based on the current system that we use, current processes we use.
No, I would suggest that this contemplates a significant compressed timeline in terms of if we're doing CIP and operating budget in the same year, each of those processes need to be significantly shrunk and compressed in terms of a schedule, and so that would require kind of changes to implement it in a quicker manner than we do today.
Okay, thank you. For clarification then, a final question on this round. It says ongoing annual impact. So this is $652,000 a year. These 5 additional staff then would be hired as full-time permanent, FTE.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spearman.
Okay. Any other questions from council? Councillor Morrow?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I'm struggling with following this. Ms. Pinkson, why all these extra costs? What are we doing different? What are we doing extra? Why 5 full-time staff?
Mayor Spearman, through to Councillor Morrow. So this is based on us moving to doing an operating budget every 2 years, as well as doing the CIP and the operating budget at the same time. And so I use the example of the individual that currently pulls together the annual report, the operating budget book for both the CIP and the operating budget, the budget documents for both the operating budget and the CIP, as well as the unaudited report and the budget annual highlight report. And all of those cannot be done by one individual at the same time. So the benefit of staggering the capital budget ahead of the operating budget gives an opportunity to just redirect resources. So this would require additional staff to support in the additional workload that is being proposed in this resolution.
So what we're attempting to do here then is have, I can't remember where that screen was where you said something about we'd need to change, I can't remember if it was the CIP to 5 years so that they, can you bring that screen up, please?
That would be slide 5.
So what I'm trying to understand, all we're attempting to do here is have the operating budget and the CIP in the same term for that council. Is that what we're attempting to do? Number one.
That's part of it, yes.
Okay. Well, so right now, one council does the operating and the other council does the CIP. Then the next council inherits the operating budget for that previous CIP. So what this will do is it'll have the one council in their 4-year term approve the capital projects with the ongoing operating costs that would be involved in those projects. Is that correct? That's what we're trying to do.
It advances the CIP to earlier in the election cycle, election term.
Okay. Okay, so just I'll ask one more and then I'll hop out because this is getting me more confused. Why don't you just start right from the beginning then? Explain the way it is now with the operating and the CIP and explain what this would look like if council approves this.
Sure. If whoever is running the slides can advance it to slide 4. This is our current process. We're currently in CIP deliberations, or we will be next week in terms of council making decisions about the 2022 to 2025 CIP, and that those decisions typically are approved by council at the end of May. Any operating impact that has been as the result of those kind of projects been approved rolls into the operating budget, which would start in 2022 with the new council in terms of the operating budget for 2023 to 2026. We do a CIP on a 4-year basis and an operating budget on a 4-year basis at this point in time. That's our current process. If we jump to slide 5, we would, based on the resolution that was brought forward, it is looking at doing the CIP and the operating budget in the same year, which would then compress both of those to a shorter period of time, and also impacting resources in terms of preparing that information and bringing that forward to council. And then it proposes that we would do a second operating budget for the third and fourth year, excuse me. The challenge is that we need, currently the CIP and the operating budget are staggered so that the costs from the operating budget from the capital budget flow into the operating budget. We would need to figure out what to do with 2026 because if we proceed with status quo next week in terms of budget deliberations, that would only be contemplating 2022 to 2025. And just looking for some direction from council on what we do about 2026, should council want to approve going to a 2-year operating budget and a 4-year CIP.
Okay, I'm getting more confused. I'll hop out. Thank you.
Councillor Kaufman?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you, Ms. Pinkson. Right now you have approximately how many people working on the budget? So, operating budget or capital budget, I'm assuming there's a predominantly a fixed staff that focus on budget this time of year.
So, like directly within my team that supports the budget process, there is 3.
Okay.
And however, we require information from the entire organization in order to pull that all together. So we depend on the office managers, we depend on the project managers, the business unit managers, the directors to provide and feed the information into that process.
Thank you. You've inherited this system or this structure, and I know that you started with the city and have come up through it. Certainly understand it better than I will ever hope to. Is there a complexity to this system that you can look up the road to the city of Calgary, which does capital and operating annually, with equivalent resources, or even if you want to make the extension, and I recognize that municipal government has different complexities and nuances than what provincial governments do, but provincial governments that are dealing with billion-dollar budgets, departmental budgets, still operating or managing to do it annually with fewer resources. Is there a complexity to our system that provides a constraint?
No, I don't believe so. I believe that, I mean, there's always opportunity for improvement, but I do not believe that we can provide what is being requested here without additional resources.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from council? Ms. Pinkston, would we be able to do something fairly simple and not as complex? If we looked at the current process and we simply brought forward the CIP for a year, one year sooner, would that add to your resources?
I'm not sure I quite understand what you mean, Mayor Spearman.
Okay, I'm quite happy with the 4-year budgets because I understand the budgets more and more every year. Every time I see the unaudited reports and the regular updates that we get, I get an understanding of the variances. So I understand the city's budgets generally are fairly predictable and consecutive. So for that part, so as a councillor, what I've appreciated is I became more knowledgeable of it. The part that I'm a little bit uncomfortable with is doing the CIP in an election year. And I would prefer to do a CIP the year before the election year, just so it's not having potentially a political taint to it going into the next municipal election. So my question to you would be, if we did the CIP 1 year sooner in the cycle and kept the existing operating cycle, how would that impact your resources?
Yeah, so I need to refer back to the March 10th presentation where we looked at options. One option was to provide a Section D update to council shortly after they were elected, in order to kind of ensure that they were comfortable with what was approved during the CIP deliberations from the previous council. Just based on the concerns that were voiced of council, that it's typically the Section D that causes the most kind of angst or discomfort because of the, just more taxation impact from those projects, as well as just the projects themselves. We did look at one option where option 2, which was where we would reorient the CIP earlier in the budget cycle. The challenge with that is then the operating budget ties the hands of the future council for longer. So the rationale for having the operating budget currently stagger 1 year after council is elected is to kind of helps with kind of what you were talking about, Mayor Spearman, in terms of orienting themselves and just providing the opportunity to understand the organization and some of the previous decisions that were made and how that impacts kind of service levels and that whole conversation and policies and all that. And so in that instance where we flipped it to reorient the CIP sooner in the process, it ended up with a longer operating budget, which would give the next council less kind of flexibility in terms of making those decisions, unless they, wanted to bring forward proposed resolutions and changes. So we did look at that option as option 2 and just kind of highlighted some of the challenges with that as well.
So simply bringing the CIP forward 1 year would create additional challenges.
Mayor Spearman, also just in terms of timing, the longer out we plan, the less uncertain it is. And so it just causes some additional requirements and estimates to establish what those costs would be if we're planning earlier. And it's potentially up to 7 years from when a project might be constructed versus when we're trying to estimate the costs and stuff. So the impact of that potentially could be more CIP amendments and uncertainty related to the projects.
Okay, I thought we would always be able to just consider the next 4 years. Councillor Morrow.
Thanks again. Sorry, Ms. Pinkston. I need to bring this simplified because so next week this council will do the CIP. We will approve a CIP by when?
The City Council would be considering the CIP at the end of May for approval.
It'll be at a City Council meeting for approval at the end of May.
Economic Committee will deliberate the CIP, and then it's brought forward to the next City Council meeting for consideration.
Okay, so then we will approve a 10-year CIP, but only the first 4 years in that 10 years will be projects that are approved. So now I'm going to skip ahead. Let's go to November 1st. We have a new council. And let's just for a minute pretend it's all 9 new faces. So now these 9 new people that are council are now going to do an operating budget, correct? If it stands the way it is, they won't do a CIP until, as the mayor said, their election year. But when will they do their operating budget then?
We would once council's elected, we do orientation related to the financial processes like we do for a variety of other kind of areas within the organization. And then starting in early January of 2022, we would start to explore the next operating budget, which if it's status quo would be for 2023 to 2026.
Okay, so my question then is, what is the difficulty, what's the problem with this council not even doing this CIP, and the new council gets elected, and November 1st or whenever, that's the first thing they do is a CIP. And then in the following year, after they're elected, as you just said, they will start getting into the operating budget. Why can't we do that?
So we currently have a 4-year CIP approved, which is 2018 to 2021. And so we would go into 2022 without a capital plan in place. And as part of the MGA, we're required to have some sort of capital plan.
No, but they'll be doing it this year. The new council will be doing it at the end of this year. They will be doing a CIP. Rather than this 9 doing it in May, the new 9 will do it in October, November, December. What's the problem with that? I don't see that as a problem.
Well, we would have, I guess if council didn't want to approve a CIP at the end of May, then I guess we would have that information brought forward for the new council to consider. If council didn't want to make a decision, we would need to have some sort of decision made by the end of December, which could put some pressure in terms of just the new council's kind of capacity to work through that in such a short period of time.
But it can be done, and if that is the way we go, would there be extra costs and extra staff involved for that? All I'm suggesting is moving from May, which is what we're going to be doing next week, us 9, just moving it to November, December, early January, however long, for the next 9. What's the difference? Why would there be more costs? Why would there be more staff involved?
So in that instance, Councillor Morrow, we would miss out on a construction season. We typically approve or council approves the capital budget so that we can start some planning exercises to ensure that we're ready for the construction season. So delaying approving the CIP would likely mean that there would be no construction able to kind of happen in 2022. And the impact of kind of what's being proposed in the resolution is slightly different in that it's looking at an operating budget every 2 years. And so it's the combination of doing operating and capital in the same year and at the same time, essentially, as well as adding a second operating budget in an election cycle that causes the additional resource requirement.
Thank you. And just to be clear, when you're talking about missing a year of construction, that would be just the first year initially now, because after that the cycle would follow. There would be no missing of a year in construction.
It would always be planning in the first CIP year, because if you would always miss the construction season, so you would have to. It would be more about planning, because they wouldn't be able to. They wouldn't know what was approved until December, so then they would have to spend the time planning in the first year of the CIP. So it would always be kind of a delay of 1 year of construction.
Thank you.
Councillor Higgin.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Question for Ms. Pinkson. Hearing a response earlier regarding not understanding, I guess, our estimated costs if on a multi-year budget like what we have. We don't really know in 3 years or 4 years what it's going to look like. Question would be, is as far as estimating costs, it made me think about this, and I know there's some struggles, but listen to what Councillor Kaufman had mentioned earlier as well. Would it not be better at estimating costs with a yearly budget then, rather than a multi-year?
I believe, Councillor Higgin, you're referring to my response to Mayor Spearman, and that was about the capital projects themselves and just planning out for 7 years if you wanted to advance the CIP timing. And so it was just about a longer period of time and trying to estimate a facility costs 7 years out. So
shorter time is easier than longer time, right? From what I understand, because then we know the costs.
Sure, you can get more reasonable estimates more often you do it. It just takes more resources to do it.
All right, thank you.
Further questions from council? Deputy Mayor Campbell. Councillor Campbell, you appear to be on mute.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Pinkson, just want to throw it out there in your expertise. What would you say? Can you give me one real advantage to staying status quo, and then one main advantage to going with the suggested change that we're looking at? So if we say status quo, in your opinion, what is the best advantage of what we have now?
I believe that status quo provides council with more flexibility to implement their strategic plan, as opposed to routine planning. So, I mean, as you can appreciate, that a lot of time commitment is on administration as well as council in terms of continuous planning, and it's an important exercise to do, and it's important to be able to adapt to it. But I think the real service to the community is being able to kind of roll out those plans and implement the strategies of council, and not focus as often on the planning process. I think in moving this forward, based on what's proposed, there would be some obviously some pressures in terms of resources, but I think that there's an opportunity to adjust more frequently if there's changes in service level that council wants to implement. Although that can be done at any time, council can always bring forward consideration to change or reduce a service level, and so maybe maybe that's not really the biggest advantage, but it certainly is one in this instance as the example.
Well, I appreciate your input because it certainly affects you a lot. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Anybody else with questions? Okay,
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it's Joe. Mr. Mayor, it's Joe. Just one quick one.
ahead.
Do we have to approve this today? Do we have to approve this today?
It's on the agenda for today. We don't have a resolution before us. So we could move to accept it as information.
So is there anyone that has this resolution then? Was this assigned to a counselor?
Mr. Mayor, in our package, it was to be decided. It was Councillor Kaufman who brought it forward, but I'd be willing to make a motion to accept the report as information. I don't know if we need a direction to status quo, but that's where I'm leaning. But I think accepting as information will achieve that. So that's my thoughts, unless somebody has a different resolution to bring forward.
Okay, I will second that. So moved by Councillor Carlson to accept the report as information. Okay, Ms. Pinkson? Ms. Pinkson?
I didn't have a question, Mayor Spearman.
Go ahead. Okay, Councillor, Mr. City Manager, Mr. Dalton?
Thanks, Your Worship. I just wanted to confirm then that given Ms. Pinkson's comments at the outset about the potential impact on CIP, that what we're saying is we're not moving forward. I just want us to be clear because this is also another piece of work that is on Finance's lap right now, and I'd just like us to get some clear direction on where we're going.
At this point, if the motion passes without another motion, then it's status quo. If somebody brings forward a resolution at a future date, as Councillor Morrow has suggested, that could change things. But at this point, the resolution on the floor is to accept the report as information, which is basically to maintain the status quo.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, if I might, I could further add that, because I do think it's excellent discussion, excellent information that's been provided. We could add that we receive this presentation as information and forward it to Council 2021-2024 for their consideration. That may be more clear that at this time I'm presenting status quo. Does that help, Mr. Dalton?
Yes, it would. Thank you.
Okay, then I'd make that amendment, receive it as information, and forward it to further that it be presented to City Council 2021-2024 for their consideration. Because I think it has been excellent. Information.
It can be part of the orientation process, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, yeah. It's good enough, as it is. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. So things move fast, and I appreciate Councillor Carlson jumping in to support the receive as information motion. I don't agree, though. So could I, this is the primary thing on our agenda. I think we've got a couple of minor issues. We will be coming back. I think we have to go back into closed session. So can I ask that we table this to the end of the meeting to take the opportunity to consider what motions I had been considering previously?
I'll second that if you need a seconder.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Kaufman, seconded by Councillor Morrow to table till the end of the meeting. Is there any debate? We just vote on that? Okay, any debate on that? Okay, so appears to be no debate, so we'll just do a roll call vote. Whether you're in favor or opposed to tabling to the end of the meeting.
Councillor Hagan,
In favor.
Councillor Morrow,
Favor.
Councillor Miyashiro, Councillor Miyashiro,
He was
Counsel-
having connection issues.
I thought he was back, but
okay. Councillor Parker,
In favor.
Acting Mayor Croson, Acting Mayor Croson, Deputy Mayor Campbell,
In favor.
thank you. Deputy Mayor Campbell,
In favor.
Mayor Spearman,
In favor?
Councillor Carlson,
in favor.
and Councillor Kaufman.
In favor.
And I'm just going to ask Councillor Miyashiro, are you there? Okay, that passes 8-0.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go on to bylaws. First is bylaw 6283, 2021 Downtown Business Improvement Area Tax. Second reading, be it resolved that bylaw 6283, 2021 Downtown Business Improvement Area Tax be given second reading from
Councillor Campbell, I think, was carrying it earlier. I don't know if he still wants to.
Sure.
Councillor Campbell.
Yes.
Okay,
Are there any questions?
I see none.
This is part of the downtown business revitalization loan procedural bylaw that's deemed a business improvement area bylaw passed under the new business improvement area regulation. So this is something we do and should be brought forward today. And unless there's any other debate or questions, I'll ask for the vote.
Okay. Any debate? Any questions? Any debate? I see none. Question's been called. All in favor? Or any opposed? That is unanimous. For third reading, moved by Councillor Campbell, be it resolved that bylaw 6283, 2021 Downtown Business Improvement Area Tax bylaw be given third reading, and the mayor and the city clerk be authorized to sign and seal the same. Councillor Campbell.
Question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There's none. Thank you. Okay, property tax bylaw and supplementary tax bylaw. Councillor Croson. Bylaw 6284, 2021, property tax and supplementary property tax bylaw. Be it resolved that bylaw 6284, 2021, property tax and supplementary property tax bylaw be given second reading. Councillor Croson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. As we have to do every year, this is setting out the official tax rates, property tax and supplementary property tax rates. And people will also notice in there the education rates and the Green Acres rates, which are not set by the city, but which the city collects and then passes on to those organizations. All of that is laid out in this. And as we have to do every year, this is setting the property rates. And unless there's any further questions, call the vote.
I just wanted to comment, not necessarily questions, but certainly, as you have alluded to, Council worked hard to generate zero rate tax increases, so overall, zero tax increase to our tax base. But residents will notice increases because of increase to the Green Acres and the provincial education tax, which have both gone up. So despite our best intentions, there will be an overall tax increase on the bill that goes out to our residents, but the municipal tax portion was maintained at zero from one year to the other on an aggregate basis.
Yes, absolutely. People have to realize we only control that one portion, the municipal tax rate. The other two are not under the control of City Council.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Higgin?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. A question to City Manager as designate. Do we know how this affects the non-residential rates, or is there an effect to that compared to previous years?
Mayor Spearman through to Councillor Higgin. So the market rate for most properties have decreased, and so there could be some changes that individuals notice on their bill, specific to depending on what their assessment value change has occurred, and based on this proposal, there is the ratio for non-residential is 2.4 times the non-resident. Sorry, the residential is non-residential ratio to residential is 2.44 times, and so assuming that the assessment value slightly decreased, they should see a zero in their municipal portion, but they will see increases related to education and green acres.
So just in another follow-up question there. So the ratio of the two, and what was the ratio, sorry?
2.44.
2.44 is the same as previous years then? Is that correct?
No, the ratio in previous years was 2.35 to 1.
2.35, and that was 2.35 for, was that consistent over numerous previous years?
It fluctuates. It's fluctuated in the last several years around the 2.4 range.
Okay, so very similar to what's been done before then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Higgin. Are there any further questions? Okay, we'll move on. Be it resolved that bylaw 6284, 2021 property tax and supplementary property tax bylaw be given second reading from Councillor Crowson. Any debate?
Call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Are any opposed? It's unanimous. We'll move on to third reading. Be it resolved that bylaw 6284, 2021 property tax and supplementary property tax bylaw be given third reading, and the mayor and the city clerk be authorized to sign and seal the same. Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Just before I call the question on this, a reminder that as soon as the paperwork gets done by city administration, tax bills will be coming out, and June 30th is the deadline. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone, but that will be happening again this year, and I will call the question.
Okay, question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Thank you. Okay. There are some inquiries and responses in the meeting package. So first one from Councillor Kaufman, inquiry and response, city waste and recycle organic facility county approval. So that has been submitted and administration has responded. Is there anything further, Councillor Kaufman?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I think I will have to take responsibility for the way that the question is worded, perhaps, but I think the spirit of the question has been actually missed in the response. Really what the public was looking for in this particular situation is at what point has council publicly stated, and probably best done through a motion at council, the continuation of curbside recycling through, in this particular case, through green waste. The response that was provided, if you look at the meeting of June 10th, 2019, the documentation was provided to council, as well as the amended, I believe it was E7 and E8. Neither of them actually address the issue of organics. Additionally, if you go back to a plan that was approved by council in 2014, I think it's somewhere along the road and this maybe Mr. City Manager is to you, somewhere along the road when we're doing these master plans, we need to be having check-ins with council. The plan was approved in 2014. This is 7 years later, and I think we maybe need to we need to have very clear conversations, public conversations about where we are and what we're doing with this information. It's great that we're following the plans that were previously established, but as I say, 7 years later, there maybe should have been a check-in before the expenditure was made and we started heading down a road that, in my humble opinion, and this might just be me, has actually changed the level of service, or we're potentially heading to a level of service change that we'll have no choice but to accept because we will have invested in the equipment. So I will take responsibility perhaps for the way that the question was phrased, but my spidey senses get up a little bit when I see the type of response that I received. There's not been a clearly defined or articulated statement by City Council at any point that this is the road we're going to head on, and that I think is what's most perplexing sometimes to the community.
I think I might ask Mr. Hawkins to respond, but yeah. Before doing that, I think there's a level of detail that might be lacking at the outset that would have clarified the confusion here, because my understanding is that the decisions were made. And I won't get in. Maybe I'll ask Mr. Hawkins to speak to the particular line item that was shared in this response that contained the food depackaging item that started this question. But I think certainly, yes, we need to make sure that we're coming back to the council of the day and touching base if decisions were made a number of years prior. But I think it's also a case of being a little more clear and explaining some of those line items so that the public can understand or track when council actually made a particular decision. But I'll ask Mr. Hawkins to please weigh in if you'd like.
Yeah, happy to do that, Mr. City Manager. Councillor Kaufman, to your point, you're right. This has been a long-standing and drawn-out process in terms of our implementing not only the diversion policy, which is a policy of council, the ICI waste diversion strategy, and then the complementary residential strategy as well. It's been a multi-year journey that we've been on, and if we're remiss at all, it's just making sure that there are some regular check-ins with council on the progress. However, having said that, we have been in front of council annually since 2015 when the ICI strategy in particular was adopted. This first inquiry is specific to the ICI waste diversion strategy and the resultant tipping fee increases and the surcharges that are in place in order to achieve the diversion targets spelled out in your policy. And contemplated in that overarching strategy and the details of it is the need to provide a facility for the ICI sector in particular to deal with organic waste. And that's what's happening in combination with the approval of a policy, a strategy, and E7 in the capital improvement plan. There has never been, other than a procurement status, a request of council to salute a specific purchase or construction project, aside from E7, which is quite a detailed, comprehensive list of issues that deal with our ICA waste strategy at the landfill. So, I do apologize if that's explicit issue with respect to composting wasn't brought forward in a more detailed manner and a transparent manner. So, but by no means have we done something that did not, in our minds, have council endorsement at policy level, at strategy level, and at the CIP level.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. I think a couple of key things in there in our minds, and this is probably part of the disconnect that sometimes occurs between policy and operations. In your minds, it might be it's seen, let's go, let's do it. Whereas in policy minds, it could be, when is this coming? It hasn't come, and I haven't seen it. So I think had it been more explicit in the presentation on June 10th, 2019, And when E7 was amended, it was actually included in the amendment. I could very easily have gone to responded to the citizen by saying, here are the decision points right there. When it's difficult for the elected body to actually be able to follow these things up. And I myself don't see any specific statement post 2014 that this is the direction we're heading. I'm getting concerned about level of service changes and things of that nature. So thank you for the response on that. And thank you, Mr. City Manager.
Good, thank you. My perception was different, and I'd like to see the resolutions that were passed, but as I recalled it, we approved the plan, and I think organics was in year 5, which was intended to be 2021. And then we got a notification about a year ago that it was going to be deferred into 2020-22. So it had been postponed a year because we weren't ready. So, but I'd like to see the resolutions that council passed, because my understanding was we implemented a blue bin program with a green bin program in year 5, and I think there's a resolution that states that.
Yeah, maybe I can just jump in, Mr. Mayor. Again, there's two different things happening here, and they are addressed a little bit in the 2 separate inquiries. One is, this first issue is with respect that we've been talking about with Councillor Kaufman, is the ICI strategy and the dates associated with surcharging at the gate at the scale house at the Waste and Recycling Center, and the investments that we're making in support of that strategy. The second strategy is the residential curbside organics program, and we do have. You're correct. There is a proposed schedule subject to a CIP approval that has yet to happen with respect to curbside residential organics collection, but it will be deliberated next week during CIP deliberations. And that schedule, without doubt, got delayed. And there was a resolution a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, I believe, that required us, when we brought it forward at that time, and it got deferred to CIP deliberations, to extend the delivery date, the future operational date of that residential program. So I just want to make sure that we're not mixing the 2 programs, because they are 2 distinct programs. They're supporting 2 different sectors in the community, and the funding is different. ICI is funded solely through tipping fees at the Waste and Recycling Center. Any future organics collection, residential organics collection, requires a change in residential rates. And again, that presentation's been made to council, at least in draft, and you'll deliberate that in more detail next week.
Okay, so residential customers will not be subsidizing ICI customers.
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, so the second one does deal with residential organics. And is there any further questions based on what has been provided back to council? I see none. We can go on to the next inquiry. It's from Councillor Miyashiro regarding sewer capacity in relation to Lethbridge Housing Authority municipal block funding request for decision.
Yep, asked and answered.
Okay, you're happy with that? Is the sewer the correct size and the right capacity to handle the extra capacity for the proposed development near 40th Street South? And the answer is no. The extension of the sanitary sewer line for this development will not result in increased stress on the neighborhood. The site was subject to a rezoning, including circulation of city staff for any implications. There were also no objections from any neighbors through the public hearing process. So it would appear to be the correct size going forward, right? Is that correct? Yeah, thank you. finally, the last inquiry from Councillor Kaufman, mail-in ballots October 2021. So will mail-in ballots and voting be available to Lethbridge residents in the October municipal election? And the response will be provided on May the 18th. Thank you. Good. With that, are there any council updates? I would offer an update from the meeting held with the Blood Tribe Council on April the 27th. I think it was a very positive meeting. It's the first meeting we've had with the Blood Tribe Council in more than a year and a half. And generally the sentiments were very good. The key item of discussion was an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, between our council and the Blood Tribe Council. And the end resolution of the meeting was that each council would go away, review the document, and if there were no substantial changes, we would be approving the documents at future meetings of our council. I don't know if any other members of council wanted to comment on that meeting. I see none. Okay. Other than that, I think we can now have a motion to go in camera. So moved by Councillor Carlson. All in favor? Okay, we're now in camera.
We need a minute to switch over.